Hi guys, so I've gotten quite a few requests from people about asking for me to do a end-to-end build video, and I've also got a request about, hey, how do I update the BIOS and the firmware on a Dell PowerEdge server? And it just so happened that I was able to pick up another R710, and I just got this. Haven't really checked it out yet. And I thought, why not make a series of videos of showing how I get this server ready for something like FreeNAS or UNRAID or something like that, with some of the products that I sell from my eBay store. And so this is going to be a multi-part series where this will be part one, where we're going to go look at this box, see what's in it. We'll go through updating the BIOS and all the firmware. We'll go through changing out any parts that we need. For example, I can already see this is missing a few hard drive brackets, so I'll probably get those replaced. And we'll upgrade the CPU and maybe the RAM too, I don't know. But anything along the way that we've discovered that we might want to change out or something like that, we'll cover that all the way to the point where this machine is pretty much ready to go. And at that point, I'm going to put this on eBay for anybody who might want to buy something that's already kind of ready and set up to go. Okay, so like I said, immediately first off, we see that we're missing some hard drive brackets. We've got these fillers. I tend to like to have everything set up so that they're ready to go, and so I'm probably going to replace these with some proper hard drive trays. These look like they originally came with some 450 gigabyte SAS drives. At least that's what the label says right here. There's no hard drives in these. I'll probably remove that label since it's no longer relevant, and I like to kind of keep things clean and get rid of that. I don't know what kind of processor is in here. I don't know how much RAM is in here yet, and I haven't powered it on yet. But before I power it on, let's take a look inside and see what we have in there. Okay, so looks like we have a PERC 6 card. So that's a SAS1 RAID controller. We'll probably end up getting rid of that. It's got the cable to the battery, which is over here. We're probably going to get rid of that. We're going to replace that with an H200 with IT mode, which is what you need for something like FreeNAS. The cables are going to need to be swapped out. These are the 8484 connectors, I believe. So we're going to need the cables for the H700, which has the 8087 type of cable connectors. Let's see what's under here. Well, there's quite a bit of RAM, or at least a lot of RAM modules in this thing. I see 6 per socket. I don't know what kind of RAM this is. Let's see, I'm assuming they're all going to be the same. And this looks like it's 4 gigabytes. Okay, so that would be what? 888, 24, 48. So probably there's 48 gigs of RAM in this thing. I don't know what kind of processors in there. I don't know if I'll be able to read it. There might be too much thermal compound to read it, but let me just kind of check. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to read that without wiping it clean. So let me just put this back and we can kind of take a look at the we can take a look at it from inside the BIOS. Otherwise, looks like we're missing a few PCI covers here. I'll probably get those replaced as well. And yeah, that's about it. So there's a couple of things I think I'd like to it looks like it has the iDRAC Enterprise module here. So that's kind of nice. They don't always come with that, and I really like to have that. So we got the iDRAC Enterprise. We're missing PCI slots. We need to replace the RAID controller. Got to get rid of this cabling and replace that. And let's see what's under the fans here. Okay. Yeah, nothing out of the ordinary. I'm not even sure if this is a working machine, so I hope it is. I was told that it should be, but I actually haven't tried it yet. So, but everything looks to be in good order. It's actually fairly clean. Sometimes I get servers that are from a dusty environment and they can be filled with a lot of dust, but this really doesn't seem like much dust at all. So I'm guessing this is from a data center that had clean air. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and just turn this guy on just to see if it even powers on or if there are any problems and stuff like that. Okay, I've already got everything plugged in. I've got the power cables in. I've got it hooked up to my KVM switch. Okay, let's turn it on. All right, I'm gonna press F2 to enter. Yeah, so there's that PERC 6 that we saw earlier in there. That seems to be working. I don't know what processor that is, a 2.8 gigahertz quad core. There's 2 of them. That's taking unusually long. Something's not quite right. And the other thing I noticed was the LED panel there. That should be blue, or if there's an error, it should be amber, but it's not lighting up at all. So something's not quite right there. And also the fact that the fans are going full blast is kind of strange. Usually it would have settled down by now. So I'm guessing there's might be some fault condition that's causing the fans to go at full speed. And yeah, this definitely doesn't seem right. It doesn't take this long for the iDRAC to come online. Okay, iDRAC's a communication failure. So definitely it looks like the iDRAC module might be faulty on this machine. Now it's going to try to reboot. Okay, well let's turn this off, and I guess I'll have to maybe replace the iDRAC module to see if that gets it to work. Alright, I'm gonna go ahead and power this off now. Alright, let's open this guy up and see what's going on here. So the iDRAC is, well, this is the iDRAC Enterprise module, but there should be another part, a counterpart to this. That's the actual, I guess they call it iDRAC Express module. I don't quite see it. Normally it's nearby. Maybe it's underneath this RAID card. So let's go ahead and take this out. Okay, I'm just gonna put the cables over here for now. And let's, oh yeah, you know what? I see it right there. There's the iDRAC module. So yeah, I definitely have to remove this RAID card. So let's pull this out for now. And to get these guys out, you have to kind of bend back these brackets to clear the card. Okay, so that's the iDRAC module. So this might have gone bad. I don't know. Let's get this out, and then I'll look through some of my other machines and see if I might be able to find a replacement for this. Remove the spring, and I think you can just pull up on this. Okay, there we go. Alright, so I'm going to try replacing this and see if that gets this machine to boot past that error. Alright, I'll be right back. Alright, so I'm back here. I found this other iDRAC Express module from another server. It was I think an R410, and this is the one that we just pulled out of this R710 that might be bad. So I think they're the same generation. They look almost identical, except that the bracket, the plastic bracket here, is quite different. So I might have to swap the brackets and pull this board out and put it in here. So let me go ahead and remove this module from the plastic bracket. It looks like all you need to do is there's these two plastic tabs. So let me just kind of pull it back, and yep, okay, so that comes out. That was easy enough. And same thing on this. Okay, so let's go ahead and put this guy in this bracket, and yeah, back into the R710. Let's see if this will help us get past that error about not being able to communicate with the iDRAC. So I'll just push that in there. This is kind of different. A lot of these systems usually have some sort of, I don't know, this is kind of different. Usually there's like a plastic, like one of these blue things that kind of snap onto it. This you just kind of press on, I guess. And of course there was that spring clip we had. So let's put that back on. Let's see which way. Probably like this. Okay, so that does that. I'm gonna go ahead and, we're not gonna use this, but for now let me just put this RAID card back in. Okay, battery cable is back in. So this is the one that might be bad. I'll put this aside in case this is not the problem. I'll maybe put it back, or put this in the other server I took it out of. All right, let's see if we can turn this guy on and see if it works. All right, guys. So I just replaced the iDRAC Express module that I think might have been faulty. Because the last reboot we got stuck on the iDRAC module, so I've replaced that. We're gonna turn it on and see if that solves that problem, and hopefully that'll be the only thing we need to fix before we kind of move on to the next steps here. So that light didn't turn on before, so that is certainly different. Oh, now I have fan 1 RPM exceeds, so looks like there's an issue with fan 1 right now, but at least this is showing up. Last time this didn't show at all, so I hope that means the iDRAC module is working now, but it looks like we still have another problem with this machine. All right, let's look at the monitor and see what we see here. The next thing here should be the iDRAC. All right, so yeah, iDRAC is working now. So it looks like the iDRAC Express module was bad. The one that we just replaced seems to allow it to boot up. It looks like it already has a default setting, so that's good. No boot device. Okay, so before I boot this machine up, let's look at one of the issues here. It says that we have fan redundancy lost. Check. I don't know if you guys can see that. Let me get it a little closer. It says check fan redundancy lost. I believe it said fan 1. Can I go back? What is this? All right, let's see. Can I go to air 1? Okay, so air 1 tells me that fan 1 RPM is either too low or too high, probably too low. And air 2 is just telling me that the redundancy is lost because one fan is down. All right, so let's take a quick look at that. I'm gonna open up the chassis. Now, one way to verify this is to look at the fans and see what's going on here. So these are clearly spinning, and that one is not. So if I pull it out, yeah, you can see it's not spinning at all, right? All right, so it looks like we have to replace a fan as well. Gosh, this one has a lot of problems. I wasn't expecting that. But yeah, if you took out one of these good fans, you'll see it's still spinning when you take it out. That's one way to check, to just pull it out and see if it's still spinning. If it's dead, it'll be like this one where there's no motion at all. All right, so it looks like we're gonna have to get a fan. So I'm gonna get that. Let me turn it off. Okay, I'm hoping you guys heard anything that I said earlier with the fans on. I don't know, I'm in the middle of recording this, but hopefully you heard that. But basically it looks like fan 1 is bad, and I'm gonna have to replace that before we move forward on this machine. All right, so I'm gonna go buy a fan, and then we'll come back to this again once I have that. All right guys, so I'm back here at the R710. The last segment, we discovered a bad fan on this machine. It's been a couple of days. I've ordered a replacement fan, and I've ordered some rear PCI cover brackets that are, I believe these are Dell ones. So I'm gonna put those on just for completeness. I like to keep things kind of neat, and you know, I know this doesn't really matter that much, but anyway. All right, so let's go ahead and just replace this. Hopefully this works, and we'll go ahead and replace these PCI brackets as well. So I don't know if you guys ever worked on the R710, but it's got these kind of funky plastic things that hold the PCI brackets in. It's meant to be kind of toolless, so you don't have to loosen any screws. But I'm not a big fan of these things. They kind of work, but because it's plastic, they tend to kind of break. And also I've seen cases where it has these little spring clips that kind of apply pressure to the brackets so they don't come off. And I think sometimes they get bent or stuck or something like that, and people just jam it in, and yeah, they just kind of get ruined. So anyway, it's okay if you're kind of a meticulous, careful person, but you know, but if you're getting a server secondhand, you don't know how it's been treated before, and I often see these things either broken or you know, just not really working right. But all right, let's get the PCI bracket cover there, and let's see. So there's a little notch that goes in there, and these springs just kind of push up against the PCI brackets. So there you go. All right. Yeah, this one looks okay as well. Okay, so this one's not too bad. I've seen some R710s that are obviously mistreated at some point, and you know, these things didn't look too good, but this one seems to be okay. All right, so we got our rear bracket covers in, and I'm gonna go ahead and put the cover on, and hopefully this time when we turn it on, we're not gonna see all those errors anymore. I'm hoping there's nothing else wrong with this machine at this point. All right, there's the bad fan. All right, let's just power it on and see how this goes. I was hoping that would go away. Oh, there we go. Hey, it's blue again. So that means that fan is working. That error is gone. Let's see what's on the monitor. It's also a lot quieter. I don't know if you guys noticed that from the previous videos. Now that the fan redundancy is okay and the iDRAC module is okay, it's a way quieter than it was before. One of these days I'm going to make a video with a sound meter so that you guys, you know, have some objective numbers that you can have to kind of gauge how much noise these machines make. But when they're in working condition, you know, this is actually relatively quiet. And when I do that video, I also put the machine under load and see how noisy it gets without a fault condition. All right, let's see here. iDRAC is working as before. It's just trying to boot. I don't have anything in there to boot yet, but okay, it looks like the machine is finally in a working state. All right, so this is good. So the next step here is, well, here, I don't really need this right now, but the next step here is I'm going to update the firmware, the BIOS, and all that stuff on this thing and bring it up to date before we start changing things out or anything else out. So right now it looks like I got the machine in a working state. There's a couple of things I need to order some of the hard drive brackets to replace these blanks. I want to remove these stickers that are not relevant to this machine. And like I said last time, there's the SAS controller and the cables need to be replaced. I got to pull out the battery, and then, you know, we're gonna have something that'll be really nice for FreeNAS or something like that. So all right, so in the next segment I'm gonna boot up, I'm gonna connect this thing to my network, and I'm gonna log into the iDRAC interface, and I'm gonna log in and show you how to update. I'm going to boot off of a little USB drive I have with like CentOS Linux, and I'm going to show you how to download all the updates that you need and how to apply them and get this thing kind of fully updated and reset back to factory defaults. All right. Okay guys, so here I am logged into, or not logged in yet, but I'm at the iDRAC interface, the web interface. And if you recognize this is like an ancient version of the iDRAC interface. So I suspect that this is actually really old. So we're going to go ahead and log in. So by the way, if you guys don't know, the default login and password for iDRAC is usually root and Calvin as the password. So that's CALVIN. And if you don't have the iDRAC already reset to its default, which you can do from the console, and you know, you're not able to log in with the default passwords, then go to the console, hit Control E when you see the iDRAC load up, and then go in there and just reset the factory defaults, and then the password will be, or the login and password will be root and Calvin. So just a little tip there in case you've bought a used machine and it's already got some password on it that you don't know. That's how you can get around it. Later on, once I've upgraded all the firmwares and the iDRAC firmware as well, I'll show you how to go about doing the factory reset step. So okay, so let's log in here. Yeah, this is definitely really old. Let's come on. Sometimes you gotta refresh it a little bit. Okay, so the BIOS version is 6.3.0. The iDRAC here looks like firmware 1.13.01. So yeah, I think that's definitely old. I think the latest is 2 something. So when I show you how to go download the firmware and all the updates, we'll see that as well. So anyway, I'm pretty sure we're gonna have to do some updating on this machine. Let's go ahead and go to support.dell.com, and so I guess it redirects me to this place. But once you come here, you can pretty much find anything, at least all the updates to your server. So I usually like to go, I mean, you could enter your service tag number here and it'll automatically figure out what it is you're looking for. But you know, if you don't want to do that, you can always go to browse all products. We're going to look at servers today. PowerEdge servers. The R710 is a rack server, so we'll go there and we'll look for R710 right there. Okay, so let's see, drivers and downloads, that's where we want to be. Okay, so something to note for you guys, if you're doing the BIOS update, or any kind of firmware update provided by Dell, there's three primary ways you can do this. You can download the update programs for Windows, and so you can pick Windows here, or you can download the update programs for Linux, basically, or some other flavor of Linux. So those are the two primary platforms. I think there's also, at least in the past, they've also had like a bootable ISO disk that had all the various firmwares, and so that way you don't have to install an operating system, you just boot that disk. So there's a couple different ways, but unfortunately it doesn't cover all operating systems. So if you're using something that's like FreeBSD based, such as FreeNAS or something like that, it's usually a little bit harder to find the right programs to update your firmware or BIOS and all that stuff on your server. So I recommend that with Windows you kind of need to deal with the licensing scheme, although you could just use a eval installation. But I tend to like to use Linux just because there's absolutely no license encumbrances there. So I'm going to go ahead and pick Red Hat Enterprise 7, and typically, because a lot of businesses use the Red Hat Enterprise, typically this is one of the more well-supported options, and that in Windows really. So you're less likely to run into a problem picking this platform. Okay, so let's go category. Let's start with the BIOS. So it looks like we have version 6.60, and this is considered urgent. I suspect there's some fixes for some of the recent Intel CPU vulnerabilities or something like that, probably. And you can see that we were at 6.3.0, so definitely we're going to need that one. So I'm going to go ahead and download this, but this is, the browser here is in my desktop, and you could download it here and then transfer it to your server, but I'm just going to go ahead and copy the link, and I'm going to download it directly to the server. So let me make a directory called Dell /R710, and we'll go in here, and so I'll go ahead and just paste the link here. Okay, so there's the BIOS update. Alright, let's see what else we have. Diagnostics, this doesn't really matter. Embedded, so this is the iDRAC, and yeah, you can see this is version 2.92. So that's a lot newer than what was here. What was it? Version 1.13. So okay, so let's go ahead and download this one as well. Okie dokie. And fiber channel, we don't have anything like that in there. Let's look at firmware. This looks like it's for the MD1000s, or kind of external storage arrays, so let's skip that. Lifecycle controller. Let's go ahead and get this one. I don't really know if it applies, but it can't hurt to try. Okie doke. And let's see what else. Network. So this machine has the quad port. Let's see. So let's look at. Yeah, so this has a Broadcom, a quad port Broadcom gigabit network card. And so, by the way, this is a little bit confusing. I noticed this change recently, but I guess Broadcom must have sold the intellectual property for this to QLogic, and so a lot of these things are now renamed as QLogic. So that's what you're actually going to look for, but the chip name is still the same. It's still like BCM something. So let's go ahead and look for firmware here. I suspect that there will be something. You know what, let me do a search for the word firmware. And Fastlink Q, no, that's probably not it. That's a 10 gig card, so that's probably not it. I don't think it's a 6100 series. Let's see what else we have here. Hey guys, so yeah, sorry, I had some problems trying to find the Broadcom gigabit network card firmware update, and as you saw in the earlier segment, it just wasn't appearing anywhere that I could find here, and it should be under the BCM57XX. So if you look at the card here, the driver is called BNX here. And so I'm looking through the the kernel message log, and you can see that this is identified as a Broadcom Net Extreme 2 BCM5709. And so that's the controller model that I have, and there's no mention of firmware for that here. There's driver source code, there's user guides, but I couldn't find the firmware, so I took that name, the Broadcom Net Extreme BCM5709, and just did a Google search for Broadcom Net Extreme 2 BCM5709 firmware update Dell, and it gave me all these links, and you can see there are different versions here. And what I found out is that, you know, like, I was naturally going for the latest version, so I think this one here is the latest, 20.8. So when you kind of open that up, you know, here's the firmware package you can download. Well, that's the signature actually, but here's the firmware package for Windows. Here's the firmware package for Red Hat Linux. And I was about to download this, but if you go further down and look at compatible systems, you'll see that the oldest system it supports is the 12th gen R720. Same thing here, R720. So R710 is not listed anywhere here. So this is probably not going to work. And so basically I had to go through a couple of these links. As you can see, I've clicked on several of these, and what I found, so there's this one's the 7.10.18 version, and this certainly, if you go down here, it certainly does support the R710. So this is a likely candidate that we could use. But I also found this other page, which uses the new name, since I guess this was transferred to QLogic. So under QLogic there is a 7.12, which is newer than the 7.10. And this is pretty much, so it's 7.12.17. This is pretty much the latest version that I can find on Google. So unfortunately Dell doesn't make it easy for you to find this. And so hopefully this helps you guys out if you're looking for this firmware update as well. I would just do a search on Google, and if you find a newer version than this, by the way, let me know in the comments, because I did a little bit of digging, and really that was the newest version I could find that supported the R710. There was a 20.4 or 21.4 as well, and that did not. Let's see, which one is this one? Yeah, this is the 21.4. So this is probably the latest and greatest. This was updated February 2019, so just about 4 months ago. And unfortunately this also does not support the R710. Okay, so we won't be able to use this one, but this, oops, this one, the 7.12, does support, let me go down here, the R710. Alright, so let's go ahead and download this package. Copy link. Alright, so that, I think that's all the firmwares and BIOSes and stuff like that that was available. I'm gonna go ahead and close out these tabs here, and yeah, so I think that's all that's available that I could find. So one thing is, these files, they're self-extracting executable scripts, so you do have to set the execution bit on these. They all end in .bin, so I'm just going to do a star.bin, and that should set the execution bit. So now I should be able to run these updates. Now, one thing to caution here, I'm logged in via SSH in a remote terminal. I would not recommend running a BIOS or firmware update over SSH, because you could lose network connectivity, and in that case, the program could terminate abruptly and end up causing some damage to your firmware or BIOS. So that's a little bit risky, so I don't recommend you do that. But what we can do is use the remote console. Alright, so let's log into the remote console. Let's go into this directory. So this is where we've downloaded all the firmware packages. So if you do a firmware update through the remote console or directly at the console, at your keyboard and monitor, let me minimize this. If this disconnects, it doesn't really matter. The program will still continue running, and you can simply go to the physical keyboard and monitor of your server to see what's going on, or try to reconnect the iDRAC virtual console app. So whereas if you did it over SSH and the SSH session terminated, it might abruptly interrupt the program, and so you don't want that to happen in the middle of a firmware or BIOS update. Alright, so we've got 5 different BIOS firmware update packages. Let's give it a go here with the BIOS. So remember earlier we assigned the execute permission to all these files, so we can just now simply run them like this. Now in the background, these are self-extracting scripts. It's extracting all the content and doing some checks, and now it's showing you kind of the release notes and so on. I recommend that you kind of read through these a little bit if you care. As you can see, I had suspected this is probably to address some of the security vulnerabilities here, so you can see that that's mentioned. But anyway, to move forward, you just press Q to get out of the release notes, and it'll do this collecting inventory thing. So it'll try to find out what you already have, and it says that it detected that we have BIOS 6.3.0 and the latest is 6.6.0. so do we want to continue? And you say yes here, and this is going to take a while, so I'm just going to sit back a little bit until this is done. Okay, so it looks like it's ready to reboot now. So I highly recommend that you do these updates one at a time and then reboot, instead of like saying no here and then trying to do all the other ones, because it could potentially mess things up. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes to reboot here, and we'll see that the BIOS update is in effect, and then we'll continue on to the other updates. Alright, looks like the system is booting up now. Let's hope we'll see the BIOS version 6.6.0. Alright, so there we have version 6.6.0. So that update went successfully. Alright, let's go ahead and log in, and we'll continue applying the updates. Alright, so we're done with the BIOS. Let's go ahead and do, I believe this is the iDRAC. Okay, again, it's just going to show you the release notes. As you can see, there are several security fixes and other things. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Q to get out of there, and it's going to collect inventory and tell me whether it found a newer version or not. So as we saw earlier, the version of the iDRAC right now is 1.13, and the current version that's in this package is 2.92. So we're going to go ahead and do this update. So again, this can take quite a while, so I'm just going to sit back and let this run, and I'll be back when it's done. Alright, it looks like, well, the iDRAC KVM dropped out, probably because the firmware is being updated. That's okay. Let's see. If we can reconnect here. Alright, so took a little while for the iDRAC web interface to come back online, but as you can see, this is now the new interface that's more familiar if you've seen the recent ones. So let's go ahead and log into this again. There we go. So it's coming together. I think it just needs a little bit of time. So you can see here BIOS version 6.6.0, which we updated. Firmware now is at 2.92 build 05. So this is coming online. Let's see if we can get the remote console here. Alright, there we go, and you can see the update completed successfully. Alright, so that's done. Let me minimize this. So in the case of the iDRAC, I don't think I'm too worried about having to reboot the whole machine, since it kind of essentially rebooted the whole iDRAC module itself. So I'm going to go ahead and run the next update. So that's the lifecycle controller. I'm not actually sure if that applies here, but let's go ahead and try it. Okay, so it looks like it found version 1.1.0.188, and it has version 1.7.5.4. Let's go ahead and run this update. Alright, again, I'm just going to walk away for a little bit and let this thing do its thing, and I'll be back in a second. It looks like the update for this failed. Alright, I might try it again a little bit later, but let's move on to the next thing here. So the next one is the network firmware and the SAS. Let's go ahead and do the SAS controller, which is the PERC 6. I'm not really going to use this card, but you know, just for completeness sake, let's go ahead and do that. Okay, it looks like the firmware for the PERC 6i is already up to date, so there's probably no reason to update this, so I'm going to go ahead and skip this for now. And let's complete the network firmware update. Alright, and then after this I'm going to reboot the machine and maybe even power it off and then power it on after letting it sit. I want to see if maybe that might clear things up for the lifecycle controller update to work, but let's finish the network update first. Okay, it looks like we currently have firmware version 4.6.8, and this package has the 7.12.17, so let's go ahead and do that. Alright, now it looks like we need to reboot the system, so I will go ahead and do that. Alright, we're fully booted up. All the Ethernet interfaces are up. Let's take a look at one of these. Alright, and you'll see the firmware is now 7.12.17, so the firmware update I believe was successful. So I'm going to go ahead and power this machine down now and unplug the power. Then I'm going to cold start it and apply the lifecycle update again and see if that works there. Okay, so we've got the system booted back up and I'm logging into the iDRAC again. Okay, and I'm going to try to launch the remote console. Okie doke. Log in here. And let's try that lifecycle controller update once again. Okay, so interestingly it says this time that there is no update package currently installed. You know, do we want to continue? I'm going to go ahead and say yes. I'm not really sure what this means. In the last run, I think it had detected an older version. Well, let's see what happens. Alright, it looks like the screen froze up and the iDRAC rebooted itself or something like that. So maybe it took effect. I am not really sure. I'm waiting for the iDRAC to come back online, and then we'll try to reconnect and see what happens. Alright, looks like the iDRAC is back online. Let's go ahead. Okay, so one thing I immediately noticed is the lifecycle controller firmware here is now the 1.7.5.4. So it looks like the firmware update took. Let's go ahead and launch the remote console here. Okay, looks like update success. Alright, so I guess that's all it took. We had to reboot the system and reapply the lifecycle controller firmware update, and it took this time. Okay, so this last segment, let me go ahead and close this out. So the last thing I want to do here is I want to show you how to reset everything back to factory default. So I'm going to go ahead and reboot this machine right now. Okay, so keep an eye out here, because when the iDRAC is being initialized here, you're going to see a prompt to hit Control E to get into the iDRAC configuration. Okay, so right here, I'm going to hit Control E and we can get into the iDRAC configuration utility. So here is where you can reset the system to its default values. So for example, if you have received a unit where someone had already set a password and you don't know what that is, and you just want to clear everything out, so you can always get into this at the console. You don't need a password or anything like that to get into it. You can always get here without any password prompting. So this is kind of like the way to bypass it. So you go down here to reset the default, hit enter, and then you say yes, and then give it some time. You'll see the iDRAC, I think, reboot itself again. So I'm not going to do this because I don't need to, it's already been done, but this is how you would reset the iDRAC to a default setting so that you can then use the default login and password for the iDRAC, which is root and Calvin, as I had mentioned previously. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and cancel that, and I'll get out of this. Alright guys, so one last thing I want to show you before we conclude this video is how to reset the BIOS settings. So that's stored in NVRAM. Now in a previous video, in order to restore the Dell logo, I had cleared the NVRAM via jumper on the motherboard. And I'll leave a card to that video in case you want to do it that way. But there's actually another way to do that, and that's what I'm going to show you today. So let's go ahead and power this guy on and get into BIOS, and I'll show you that there's they call it a soft NVRAM reset that you can do without actually opening up the box. So all we have to do is wait for this post to happen, and then up in the upper right corner there will be a prompt to press F2 to enter the BIOS setup, and when we see that, we'll hit F2 and get in there, and then I'll show you the key sequence to reset the BIOS settings to the factory defaults. Alright, we got the Dell logo, and then we're just waiting for the prompt here. Oh, there we are. I'll hit F2 and you'll see that it says entering system setup. So that'll get us into the system BIOS once the rest of the post process is complete. Alright, so now that we're in the BIOS setup screen, the way to reset all the settings to factory defaults, there's actually a kind of interesting key sequence. So what you have to do is make sure that the num lock is on. So that's my num lock light, so that's on. Turn on caps lock as well. So you'll see there's caps lock, and then scroll lock. So once you have all three of these key locks are activated, then you hit Alt E, Alt F, so that's F, and then Alt B, and the system will reboot with factory default settings. So you'll see it just rebooted itself. We'll wait for this to finish, and then I'm going to get it back into the BIOS and make some of the changes that I want to make on the server. So definitely one of the settings I want to change is this memory test during post. That takes an awfully long time, and I don't really think it matters that much, so I definitely want to disable that. Alright, so now that we're in the BIOS, let's go in here. I want to disable the system memory testing. Get out of that. Processor settings. Let's enable virtualization technology in case we want to use this as a hypervisor, which is a great use case for this R710 since it has pretty good memory capacity. And I think that's it for that. The embedded SATA controller is fine as is. Boot settings. Let's do hard disk emulation for the USB drive. Integrated devices. I don't think I really need to do anything here, but I'm going to disable the, where is it? I'm going to change this. So I don't plan to do any PXE booting, so I'm going to just turn that off so we don't have to wait for that to go. So I'll have it. I'll leave it enabled, but I'm just going to turn off the PXE booting option. And that's probably, there's nothing there I need to do. Same thing here. And I think, well, let's see, user defined string. Oh, I'll just leave it as is. Power management. I think that should be fine as is. Okay, so that's all there is. I'm gonna exit, save changes. Alright, so that pretty much concludes this video. We went through the process of getting this server set up and going. We had to replace some parts that apparently have gone bad. Namely, the iDRAC Express module seemed to have gone bad, so we got that replaced. Turns out that one of the fans was bad, so we got that replaced. Then we got the system booted up. We updated the BIOS and all the firmwares. The lifecycle controller firmware took a slight roundabout way to get there. We had to do a kind of a clean reboot in order to have the firmware update take. And then we reset everything to factory defaults. I showed you how to reset the iDRAC to factory default settings. I actually already did that, and then set in the specific IP addresses that I wanted for this lab here. So, but I showed you where you can do that, and then now we just finished resetting the BIOS to factory defaults. And so these are the type of steps that I would normally take for a server that I'm planning to use for myself. And in particular, you know, resetting the things like the BIOS settings and the iDRAC to factory defaults, I find to be kind of good, generally good practice, because sometimes, you know, since if you, or especially if you're buying these machines used, you don't really know what other people have changed in the BIOS or the iDRAC or anything like that. And so it's nice to have it at a factory default state, because sometimes, you know, due to some setting that the previous owner had set, you might run into a conflict, you know, with a PCI card that you're installing, or maybe the way the memory modules are set up or something like that. So it's nice to just have it at a factory default and then make the changes you want starting from there. And that way you're not chasing your tail, wondering why something's not working. Even though, you know, maybe other people have said it works, or maybe you have multiple machines and, you know, it works on one machine but not, you know, not the one you're working on. Sometimes that could be due to some obscure, you know, setting that hardly anybody ever touches, but, you know, a previous owner needed to make a change there, and now it's causing you problems as the next owner of the machine. So I always like to kind of reset everything to factory default. and then I know I'm starting from a known good state, and then I can make changes along the way. And you know, if the change I make causes a problem, then at least I know that it was due to a change that I made and not something that someone else had made. So anyway, this machine is pretty much ready to go for what we wanted to accomplish in this video. And in the next video, I'm planning to update and modify the storage subsystem so that this will be ready for something like FreeNAS or UNRAID. So basically that will involve replacing the SAS controller, the cables, and I'm going to show you how to remove these labels nicely so that we can get rid of these labels that are no longer relevant for this machine. All right, so that's it for today's video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you liked it, please hit the thumbs up for me, and make sure to subscribe to my channel if you'd like to be notified of the next video in the series or other videos that I'll be making. All right, hey, thanks a lot, guys, and have a good day. Bye-bye.